I'm Jim Czek.
I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with another episode of Beyond the Ballot, where we look beyond the ballot. And the big news, obviously, we're going to talk about the budget. That's one of the things. Is this budget the budget for the moment where we're at? You know, like Jason Jacques, the interim PBO, I don't know how long he's going to last there, when he put out words like shocking, stupefying, alarming, unsustainable, we're standing at the edge of the cliff. You know, those are, for a CPA to say those words, that's, you know, as a CPA, that's alarming, right? For him to come out and say those words is alarming.
I think that his next phrase was really important. He's like, we don't choose these words lightly. We know that we have to use a tremendous amount of prudence in what we say. And I thought that was a very eloquent way of really drawing attention to what they are trying to articulate to the Canadian public. What was really surprising to me was that mainstream media, or maybe I shouldn't be surprised anymore. And Jim's like, I'm not surprised at all. But, honestly, it was that mainstream media just did not cover it in the same way. It was, it was kind of like, there, little boy, you just don't know what you don't know. I thought he did a great job of defending himself. For 17 years, I've been looking at these budgets. I've been building these budgets for 10 years. So he definitely knows the ins and outs of what this looks like. And for him to say that this is shocking and scary, I think that all of Canada needs to pay attention.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a CPA, and I've sat in the room with these guys for, forever. And they choose their words very carefully, especially when you work for the government. You choose those words very carefully, and you don't want to be accused of fear-mongering and all those things. And when he says that, you should amplify that by 10 for common people. And then you watch David Atkin from Global News, the parliamentary, he does the coverage for the parliament there, saying, don't worry about it. This guy's just, he's just talking. They run cover. And then Ian and I this morning in our daily newscast that we do, we just, as an example, said this should be the number one story on every news outlet. This should be it. This is a record budget, not just a small record. This is a blow it out of the park record, like almost double in deficit. And you go to CBC. We went on the CBC and we showed it on the screen. I think there were like 6 or 7 stories that showing above the fold there. 5 of them had Trump in it. That's it. No budget stories. Trump, 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 Trump. All distractions, right? All Trump. Right, and the same thing goes for CTV, right? Just throwing red meat at the rabid people that still go to CBC, right? Just absolutely ridiculous, right? So
yeah, I did see on Vasi Capella's show, I did see James Moore. I thought he did a phenomenal job of articulating exactly what that means, like how much that deficit means to the general public. 11 cents of every dollar right now of taxation that's going towards just feeding the debt machine on interest. That is outrageous. I mean, you got to think credit card debt is 20%. This is 11% of every dollar is going towards this. So that's not the interest. That's not the interest charge, but that's how much of our tax has to go towards paying it. So it's absolutely outrageous how much we are paying towards that debt right now. And I thought James Moore did a phenomenal job, former MP and cabinet minister under Harper. And he said, you know what $68 billion could buy? And he went through all of the different sports teams across Canada, every last one of them you could buy for $68 billion. And he said, and you'd still have billions left over. And, one of the other commentators said, yeah, but, what about Connor McDavid's contract? And I went, oh my goodness, after this like very eloquent way of putting how big $68 billion is, that's what you have to say. Like you're going to literally just talk about, Connor McDavid and kind of make light of it. We should have horns going off right now. So that the Canadian public pay attention to how big of a number this is and how bad of a position this puts us in as we move forward. If these numbers were coming at a time where we saw the government really investing in our economic generators, that'd be one thing. That is not what is happening. It is being spent into oblivion by a bloated government that is way over what it should be costing us right now, and not on the right things moving forward.
You know what it also buys us? About 5 aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers. Do you know what I mean? They're about
You know
the
what else it
Gerald.
buys us? It buys us pipelines. It buys
Yeah.
us 3 pipelines.
Gerald, the Gerald R. Ford, one of the, it has about 5,000 people on board there. I watched the clip on it last night, actually. It's about $13 billion there. There you go. The one thing that people compare to, look at the Americans' deficit. Well, the Americans get something that we don't have, and then that's why I brought the military in, is they have a currency that is the reserve currency that's used by all the central banks all around the world. So they get to export their inflation. We don't have that. Nobody takes Canadian dollars and uses reserve currency. And they also have the strongest military in the world. So they get to do a lot of things that not a lot of nations get to do. So you can't compare us to them when we talk about debt. I mean, our debt is, you compare it to other countries that are of similar stature, and that's where you look at what these debts mean to us, right? But the Bloc leader, Yves Francois Blanchet, said he really needs to have a look at that budget as it stands, and he says his 22 MPs don't look like they're willing to support it at this point. And that's code for what do we get, I guess, when you talk about Quebec, right?
Indeed. And, if there isn't something in there already, it's going to be very difficult for Carney to add it retrospectively. So if Carney hasn't seen that one coming yet, which I can only imagine that he has, I would be surprised if the Bloc would support it. But I also, I'm going to be very surprised if the Conservatives can support it. Without those two parties, this budget's going to fall and government would fall. So it'll be interesting. There's method to the madness. There's a reason that we're not going to see that until November 4th, and the House rises only a month later. That's not going to give those MPs and those staff enough time to really go through meaningfully. And so I could see that we don't have enough time, and the budget ends up either being hung or put down.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way the Conservatives would approve it is if there's a pipeline in there, and it just would go against everything that's kind of happening. Maybe, you know what I mean? I can't see the Conservatives approving this budget, and if Quebec doesn't get what it's want, this could be another election.
Yeah, and I really, we have to think. You mentioned the U.S. earlier, and I was with a bunch of U.S. business owners over the course of the last few days, and I have to tell you, they're loving what's going on. They're able to invest in their companies, in productivity measures, in new innovation and technology at a pace that I'm looking at it and I'm going, I would love to invest that way, but I have to invest after tax dollars. I don't get to invest the same way that they get to invest. And I certainly don't get to roll over investments one after another. So, the taxation aspect, and not once did they say, I love what Trump is doing because it saves me more money that I get to then spend on myself. Like, that's not what they're doing. They're investing in their companies, and they're growing their companies at paces that would be absolutely mind-blowing to the Canadian business sector. We don't have anything that is growing at the pace of what some of these companies are doing down in the States. So it's very, very interesting and very telling. You mentioned the military. Think about how many contracts are involved in that military spending, whether it be technology companies, whether it be, the actual manufacturing companies that are involved in all of those, military weapons, or whether it's the actual supplies that are involved in those military weapons. You've got a ton of ancillary and effectual indirect economic generators that are really buoyed by some of that spending that the U.S. does. We don't see that same buoying here in Canada. It just isn't the case. They're not spending on economic generators. And in fact, that $4 billion for the BC ferries is going offshore, and that's a perfect example of how we're not spending money to really see our economy grow.
Yeah, if we look in our cupboard for what Canada has and what the world wants from Canada, it's energy. And that's the one thing they really are having a tough time figuring out, and that's what they want to sell, because they're, the liberal policies over the last decade have actually put that, it's gathering dust or whatever for some strange reason. They don't want to sell that, and they want to sell something else, hydrogen and other things that we don't have yet. And windmills and all kinds of other things. And not that, it's not that I don't believe in that stuff. It's just those things aren't ready for prime time. That's not what the world wants right now.
Yeah, and we can't sell windmill energy. We can sell technology, but we're not there on the technology side. What I would say is that energy is everything and cheap energy is prosperity, and we do not have either of those. If we take it back to the budget, is it just a pipeline that the Conservatives would support? Probably not. They probably would also support anything that's energy related and that's economic, that's going to drive our economy forward. I just don't see that happening, and I don't think that that's what's in the budget, but I hope that Carney surprises me on this one.
Yeah, the big thing is, they vilified guys like Elon Musk and that, because if I was in charge, if I was, I'd pick up the phone and say, look, I know that you're looking to build big AI data centers. We got cheap energy here. Come here and we will help you have cheap energy, and we'll guarantee that energy for the next 50 years. And I can tell you right now, there'll be a competition for guys coming, but they're not coming here, right? Because they're reviving plants like 3 Mile Island instead. That's what they're doing, right? Like that's what Microsoft's doing. They're restarting 3 Mile Island.
We are so far behind on the AI space. It's scary to me. And we do have something that everyone wants, which is energy, but we are not selling energy right now. It's the most bizarre thing to me ever. So we're selling everything but energy, and we're not even selling. I mean, our exports are down since Trump taking power, while Mexico's are up, while the EU's are up. So we are in a scary situation, and with an economy that has shrunk over the course of the last quarter, I think, it behooves us to really pay attention and try and figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to move forward out of this recession and out of these difficult times. Did you happen to see, and I did not fact check it, so I'm going to fact check it against what Jim knows, but did you happen to see that how many contracts has Carney secured, and it's like 43 for Brookfield or something. I don't know if it's true, and I would have to fact check it myself. But if that is indeed anything that is true, that's a scary one, because I haven't seen him working as hard when it comes to moving Canada forward. That press conference that he did out in Europe was absolutely abysmal when it came to answering a very simple question: what companies are you meeting with? We've seen Trump being asked that exact same question. Yeah, exactly. And we've seen Trump being asked that exact same question. And Trump has like chapter verse: these are the CEOs that came with me. These are the companies we're meeting with here. Here are the deals that I'm signing with these big companies. And Carney couldn't list one, and couldn't even name a sector, and really said, I am actually not telling the truth, because if I was, I could answer this question, and right now I can't answer it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, so the media puts out things on Trump and anti-science, medication, all that stuff, and yet yesterday, standing next to him is Pfizer making a huge deal, which then we end up losing because Pfizer goes back to Canada, or it goes back to the U.S. And one thing I want to make a point on to people that lose their mind about Trump: Trump is doing what he was elected on. He said, "Make America great again," and he's gonna work at bringing back, manufacturing, production back to the United States. That's, his right as an American. We should be competitive in wanting to see, like, oh no, you don't want to go to America, you want to stay here because this is where it's better, right? But instead, we just are like a bunch of sore losers. We're pointing our fingers, and Trump's the devil and all this stuff. But all these companies are going there for a better investment climate, less regulation, less taxation. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out we need to fix that problem here in Canada to attract people back.
There's a saying that says when you point a finger, there's actually 4 pointing back at you. Or, I think that we need to seriously look at ourselves. If we were at all competitive, businesses would not be attracted. It costs so much money to move a business. This is not something that anyone does lightly. There has to be a huge advantage in doing so. And that is exactly what companies are seeing in the US Canada comparison, or even the Canada EU comparison. When we have, we're looking out east, and when you have developers like Mattamy Homes shutting down, I mean, Mattamy is one of the oldest family owned and operated development companies out east. When you have them shutting down projects, when you have Dream, which is another massive company out east, when you have Dream like basically shuttering their Canadian operations and and their global operations firing on all cylinders, that is a signal that we are not competitive, that we should be doing something differently. And this government is not. Instead, we're going to, muzzle people so that they can't talk about things. And instead of trying to make the business climate better, this is not sophisticated politics. This is politic 101. And for those of us, I mean, I am not a Trump fan, and I will say that 100 times over. Having said that, chaos is a strategy. Chaos is 100% a political strategy. And right now, Trump is keeping the rest of the world in chaos, and he is keeping the US in a cocoon. So yes, is inflation going up? It is, but he is also drawing jobs. Their unemployment rate is sitting at 4.4%. That is a huge issue when you have a huge number of youth that can't find jobs in Canada versus 4.4% in the US.
Anita Anand stood there at the UN. And, like that speech she made there about how Canada is leading the world in multilateralism and all these things, and basically took a couple smacks at Donald Trump at the same time. And then if you pan out and you'll see the room is empty. Nobody cares what Canada has to say about multilateralism and all this stuff. They're leading in a race that nobody wants to be in.
No. And, and then for Carney in that interview to say that we were going to be a carbon competitive nation is absolutely ludicrous. Nobody is competing in that space anymore. Everyone has left the table. There is no one eating what that is producing. And we need to shake our heads and figure out how to make money for our citizens, or our citizens will start to revolt.
Trevor Toom says the budget warning that Canada cannot ignore. I remember what Trevor Toom actually spoke out against Carney in the past there too, when he was running, when the race was on, and he said that he was smarter than Trevor Toom. So we're going to see how smart he actually is, I guess, right?
Yes. Yes, indeed. Two economists duking it out. My money's on Trevor Toom.
The Business Council of Canada also came out and said that we are in an investment crisis. You and I talk about that a lot, and warn prosperity can't be achieved by taking on more debt. Capital is fleeing Canada. That is an undisputable truth. That's happening. That is happening. If people get to choose where they invest capital, we saw just today an announcement, GM. Cutting production in Canada, amping up production in the United States. We said that EV, get rid of that EV mandate, because certainty is what businesses look for. Get rid of that EV mandate, or those auto manufacturers, which are American companies, are going to go home. So is Doug Ford going to light a Silverado on fire now? He lit, pouring whiskey out. Like what's the plan? It just seems to be all performative, just photo ops and just nonsense, as opposed to like, how do we make GM want to stay, as opposed to, forcing, because I think the union came out today, Unifor, and said we need to start seizing their assets and stuff like that. Just like, oh, that's going to help, right? That's going to help businesses. Just like GM's going to say, oh, you're going to seize our assets. Yeah, well, let's invest in Canada.
Yeah, and I mean, truth be told, I'm not impressed with the unions right now, whether it's the BCGEU. They seem to be tone deaf and lacking any sort of understanding of how bad the situation is here, with the NDP and with our deficit, and demanding, making massive demands is just simply not going to work. Canada Post again, making demands that are going to result in further hemorrhage of funds, and then saying, no, it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is. I mean, numbers don't lie.
$10 million a day.
That is what we are hemorrhaging every single day, and the Canadian taxpayers don't have it to hemorrhage. We're posting these $68 billion deficits. There is no more money for Canada Post. And so for Canada Post Union to be saying that we're not we don't have enough money at the table yet, is simply just a ridiculous statement. So, the unions certainly have not done themselves any favors by appearing completely devoid of a context of reality. I think that this is not going to bode well, as we move forward. But having said that, we are in crisis. And unless we see something change, we will continue to be in crisis. So thank goodness that we have the Trevor Toombs of the world that will actually sound the alarm bell and show us that this is a warning that we cannot ignore. This is something that we actually have to take very seriously. And right now, I just don't see the government doing that.
Here's Melanie Jolie telling us that they finally get it. Let's see. Let's listen in on Melanie Jolie tell us that they finally understand what the number one thing for Canadians is. Do we have it?
As we all know, right now we're living in a much more complicated and dangerous world, one that is shaped by rising trade tensions, to say the least. Now, what we're seeing is that there's a link between security and the economy. And for decades, we've counted on stable allies, open trade, and an ever-expanding consumer base. But today, global markets are shifting. Supply chains are under pressure, and Canadians across the country are really feeling the impacts of all this at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and when paying their bills. Affordability is the number one issue in the minds of Canadians. And our government is rising to the challenge with a clear mandate to bring costs down and to build one strong Canadian economy. We've already cut taxes for 22 million Canadians, and we've cut the carbon tax. Competition is another way we're lowering prices.
That's tough.
Because
affordability, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very disingenuous to say that they are making it less expensive. I think they need to go through the last 10 years of their history and of Melanie Jolie's tenure as an MP and go through all the ways that they've increased the cost of living to Canadians and all the ways that they have not been focused on our economy and focused on moving our economy forward. This is, again, just an arsonist trying to put out the fire that they set.
Yeah, Tiff Macklin even said some words the other day and saying, these problems originated back about, 15 years back. And I'm just like, Tiff, come on now, you're being a little political there. Because Stephen Harper left with a couple pipelines that were supposed to be built, and the Frontier project was going ahead with Teck. All these things that were already put into motion, the purchase of the F-35s, were all killed. And I can lay out chart after chart after chart, Melanie Jolie, and show you the divergence of the uncoupling of the two economies that were tied together at the waist. You know what I mean? You can just see the uncoupling, and it's there. It's obvious unless you're on a diet of CBC and CTV. You can see the numbers. They're clear for people to see what happened. Like Tiff, let's be honest and let's be serious. Yeah, the problem started about a decade ago.
Yeah, there was that was definitely that's definitely part of it. I would say but I think the other part that needs to be recognized is all of the bureaucracy and regulation that they have subjected these companies to. Talk about we just have spent time talking about how we lack competitiveness here in Canada. You want, she's talking about wanting competition, but we are so uncompetitive, we won't even buy from ourselves. So this is so disingenuous. And like I said, you want to actually get to the bottom of it, get rid of all the bureaucracy, get rid of the massive government bloat, get rid of, the environmental regulations, get rid of the industrial carbon tax and the cap. And we just heard from Carney at the UN interview that he has no intention of doing that. You can't be talking out of both sides of your mouth. You can't say, I totally understand and I hear you and I'm going to help you if you're not going to help. That's gaslighting and nothing more than that.
Well, they just had a chance to prove to Canadians that they were serious about business. They had a chance to remove the emissions cap, and they voted to keep it. So there you go. Daniel Smith.
69, the pipeline regulation. They could have done so many different laws, and instead they want to muzzle Canadians. Okay, like that again, like just lacking any sort of attachment to reality.
Daniel Smith put this out. Canada's become economically weak and vulnerable to the whims of our largest export market. That's obvious, right? I mean, we had a chance. The Northern Gateway Pipeline, the Eastern Pipeline, all those things. But we, the Liberals, chose to put us at the mercy of one customer, just any business. You should know that, right? Any business, if you're a business operator, you don't make, so reliant on one customer. And then she's saying that we need to do three things: scrap oil and gas production cap, overhaul new no pipelines law, and eliminate the tanker ban. I mean, these are pretty obvious things.
Obvious.
And in Canada,
and this is for the one industry. That's just for the oil and gas sector. You could take on all of those and add the mining sector, add the forestry sector, it doesn't matter which sector. We have absolutely hammered them with regulation, bureaucracy, taxation, and environmental constraint. If we want to get serious about this, we need to literally let the floodgates wide open and open up to a much greater production, and in doing so, also to other trade partners. Which again, how many has Carney, gotten on board since May? None, zero, zilch.
More forestry companies announcing closures. One locally here, in Merritt, and then one out in Ontario. And of course, all they do, the media there is it's Trump. Well, I mean, these problems existed long before that. We've done tons of stories on it, tons and tons of stories. They can't get access to fiber. They can't get access to fiber. I mean, Canfor said this about a year and a half ago. There is no certainty in British Columbia, so we will not proceed with investments in British Columbia. Again, this is the thing. We have a dishonest media, and we have a dishonest government. When they point to Trump and saying it's his tariffs that did this, we've done it to ourselves. We've done it to it's self-harm. It's actual self-harm.
Yeah, the softwood lumber issue has been an issue since the NDP government came into being, in 2017. They have not been able to actually get a new agreement with the U.S. It has nothing to do with Trump. You're bang on in terms of the fiber supply. The lumber companies or timber companies have been begging for a stronger supply of fiber and just can't get it. I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but there's been some photos circulating of these yards that are normally chock full this time of year that are absolutely barren. And when you do not have fiber supply and a consistent supply, you absolutely will not be able to move forward. So yeah, the lumber industry, whether it's Canfor, whether it's Tolco, they are investing in other parts of the world and not investing here in Canada or here in BC, because they simply do not have the certainty that's required to make those billion-dollar decisions.
When I was a youngster, I spent 10 years working in the sawmill industry, and I almost knew everybody. For a long time, I knew so many people in my circle that made their living off of forestry. Do you know what I mean? And many communities in British Columbia started up because of forestry. You can go to Prince George, and they don't start those communities because it's a great place to visit the snowbank. They start because of mining and forestry, right? 20 years to get a mine permitted. I mean, how long that takes to get a mine permitted in Canada? We need to speed things up. But look in the United States, they just invested, the American government invested in a lithium mine to speed it up, because they know that lithium is so important to the new future, the tech, the AI, and all that stuff. And here in Canada, we continue to drag our feet and just hand wring. And, I listened to Evan Solomon. He's the guy that used to fail journalist for CBC, an art dealer. He was selling art to Mark Carney, of all people, and then he went to work for Eurasia Group. They seem to be all really tightly connected. And he's talking about that they're going to go across Canada and listen to people and see what our AI future is. They recognize how important it is. I think AI will reach singularity probably in a couple of years, and Canada will still be wringing its hands and going across, blowing money on on junkets and stuff like that.
Well, I was going to say, if you're doing across Canada, I mean, I don't know if you've ever attended any of those roundtable discussions, but in the many that I've attended, you are not going to do a fulsome deep dive into the world of AI on around the country tour. So, for sure, get the experts across the country to come out to Ottawa and give you a roundtable that way. But you're not going to get it from doing a 10-minute conversation with that many different companies. So. We are just not serious. We're not serious as an economy. We are not serious, about technology. We are not serious about energy. We are not serious about our people and about making affordability a reality for our people. We are in a difficult time right now, and right now I don't see this government responding.
Here's some advice again, free advice for the Liberals. Pick up the phone, have somebody that is serious. Pick up the phone. Call Elon Musk if you can get him on the phone. Apologize, relentlessly apologize, and then kind of like beg on his Canadian roots and say, just help us figure this AI thing out. Just just because your mother was a Canadian, Saskatchewan, is there anything that you can do? And we do apologize for our. I don't know. He's the most important man in technology. I mean, it's not just me saying it. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, the highest market cap, he said he's the most important man in technology right now. That is it. Like, that's where we need to spend our energy, not going around on junkets and visiting small places and asking them what they think of AI, because nobody knows. Like, I mean, all the thought leaders for AI are in the United States.
I've got a better idea for you, Jim. How about instead of putting that money towards taking all your politicians in $6,000 limos and traipsing them around, why don't we just give that money to young tech companies who could figure it out for us? And if we want to, even make Canada an investor in some of these companies, the same way we did in a pipeline, and actually figure out how to make money for the Canadian public off of some of the new and innovative technology. I mean, our country is so backwards in understanding what propels entrepreneurs and the tech industry forward. I think there's so much work to do, and if they just stop spending money on administration fees for dental plans or on some of the frivolity of
$72 million.
Yeah, or on an app that doesn't actually work when you come into the country. I mean, honestly, we would be doing a far better job. Or the $282 million that's still missing on the Green Slush Fund.
So they said they're going to go after that ArriveCam money, the $64 million that was wasted on that. But guess how much they're going after? They're suing for?
I don't know.
$192,000 from the $64 million. That's what they're after. So that'll be just the cost of doing business. They'll say, okay, so they'll probably say, here's the $192 million. You sign an agreement that says that this will end any prosecution, any other lawsuit, and it costs of doing business, right? It's just like a traffic ticket, right?
I was going to say, that's not even a traffic ticket. That would be their legal cost to get mobilized and fire up on any sort of a lawsuit. So no, that's an insignificant amount of money indeed.
Western Standard has some breaking news. They say that Alberta government is to lead new pipeline application to BC Coast. I mean, that just came out. I didn't look into more. I mean, there's some rumbling out there that Alberta is going to pitch something. And of course, then John Rustad came out as well, fully support Alberta's effort to get Canadian oil to the coast. And he says he's tired of relying on the Americans. And then there was a clip here from EBU saying, well, they're just talking. Nobody wants it. And again, I think most Canadians want it. They want prosperity. I was just at the...
A 77% poll is actually very significant. 77% of Canadians want pipelines and want energy.
We need jobs. We need a whole bunch of things. And again, the world it's AI is going to lead this world. It is the biggest... bigger than the Industrial Revolution, I believe, but AI needs something that we have, and yet we don't want to sell it. Because if you look in the United States, look at the announcements. Meta is building a data center, big as Manhattan, as large as Manhattan. The energy needs is just I think they said that they need 3 times the electrical energy that they have right now. And it's just like knock, knock, knock. That's the opportunity for Canada, right? that's the opportunity.
And that's just one company. I mean, whether it's Meta, Google, OpenAI, they're all building these data centers. They're all building these massive plants. And they don't need one, they need many. So, I mean, we are so far behind the 8 ball. And I know that Kevin O'Leary, people kind of like, oh, yeah, well, Kevin O'Leary, pipe dream, and but I think he was onto something. I think he knew and understood that when you have cheap energy, you can actually supply to these AI giants. And I think that even though he lives in the U.S. for the most part now, he's actually trying to benefit Canada. And I just don't see anyone else leading that charge other than Danielle Smith. And good on Rob Shaw for leaking the story yesterday, and and kind of having that advance notice. But I think it'd be great if we could actually see something come to fruition. And there was those reports just recently about Danielle Smith and Carney getting along better, and they've both got mutually beneficial interests. And I believe it was when Carney had the cabinet out, or maybe it was the full caucus out in Edmonton. They had been meeting. So very interesting to see how this transpires and what this actually looks like.
There is some really strong Canadians and like that are high up in AI, and Elon Musk, one of them, Chamath, another one, and Kevin O'Leary, he's got some backing, and they have a little bit of favor towards Canada. All he's got to do is just pick up the phone and ask them, say, hey, why don't we just have a chat? Like, it's a little round table with those three. There's more though that would actually listen, including here. We're going to play a clip here from this U.S. ambassador who has said some things, but he's speaking very highly of Danielle Smith here. Let's listen in on him.
And Ambassador, you said the oil sands tour was good. What is your takeaway from that operation, and what do you think the role that it could play is for U.S. energy needs?
Well, I mean, when you're up there, what you clearly see is the deep level of cooperation between Canadian businesses, Canadian workers, and American businesses and American investment. And it's bringing prosperity to both the province and to the United States of America. That's what relationships are kind of built on. And it was very, very impressive. There's new technologies that are being introduced because of that type of cooperation, not only on extracting the oil, but doing it more effectively, doing it more efficiently, and doing it more environmentally friendly. Technology and solutions that can be used on the north side of the border that can also be, implemented on the south side of the border. And, it's awesome. But, the other thing, Premier, next time I come, you got to expose me to more of your high-tech sector, because I think in the introduction at the Banff Global Conference on Thursday, you talked about, not only what you're doing in the extraction business, but also what's happening with high tech. And I think, again, that's another future area where there's immense room for cooperation and development and investment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, we need more Danielle Smiths. And again, whether or not she's your cup of tea, she is doing exactly what she set out to do, and what she said she was going to do, and what she was elected to do, which is really support the Albertans and figure out how to get their energy out of their borders. So I think she's doing an amazing job. She's getting the right people around the table, and she's getting the right people and conversations going. So it's very impressive for anyone who has visited up in the oil sands. It's quite amazing, all that is happening up there.
Let's remember, this lady was painted as a villain by many Canadian media outlets, and everything she does for Alberta benefits the rest of Canada. Anyway, Quadra Homes CEO Sean Bouchard had something to say about this. You've talked about this quite a bit, the Step Code 4. He said it's going to add $25,000 to the cost of the home. You won't take 114 years to get that back. Not a lot of people living that long right now, but possibly in the future. But listen to a little small clip from Sean first.
We have a serious challenge, a very serious challenge of producing housing right now, more serious than anything in my entire career. And it's a long one. I've built over 6,000 homes, 38 different projects, $1.2 billion. It's never been worse than it is today. So I'm not even going to talk from my notes, because I want to talk about the seriousness that we have and how important it is for the government take the action needed to help address this serious problem. We have lots of experts here, lots of experts in the industry. I'm a for-market developer, but I've also done affordable housing projects, and I've also done deeply affordable projects. Our industry builds 95% of all homes. And yet, most times we're not brought to the table in helping give the information for the policies that get passed. What that means is the government bodies can't make a good decision if they don't have good, viable information.
Stop it there.
And so if you don't know what the
Yeah, he goes on to say that going to step code 4 is actually going to cost another $25,000 per unit. He's bang on. It's absolutely correct. Going to step code 5 is going to increase that even further. In estimates with the Minister of Environment back in 2024, I have him on record saying that it's going to increase housing costs by 10 to 12% to get to that step code 5, and it's only going to lower after 10 years. Our emissions by 0.8 of a megaton, which is absolutely a drop in the bucket. When you look on the world stage, that's not even it's a rounding error. It's not even a significant amount. So when you look at what it's going to cost the average house owner or renter, and this is not about home ownership. This is about the cost that it actually takes to form a rental or to form a for-market home, and not home unit, I should say. So, when we're talking $25,000, $35,000, $45,000, he's bang on. The other thing that we have to add to that is the $25,000 to $38,000 to $50,000 to $140,000 if you're in the Lower Mainland of development cost charges. And and I know everyone wants developers to pay their way. It's not about developers paying their way. It's about every single homeowner paying their way. But it's more than paying their way right now. I mean, the city of Kelowna has over almost $1 billion bank account. The city of Vancouver has $5 billion bank account. The city of Burnaby at $3 billion bank account. I mean, if you just add up what all the municipalities are sitting on, the development cost charges that are being accrued and accumulated are astronomical. And if you actually put that all back into housing, I think you'd have a very, very different look at what housing affordability will be. But government has a decision to make, and going to step code 4 is going to be crippling. Going to step code 5 will be absolutely catastrophic for the housing market. And we're going to look back on these days and think, what were they thinking?
One of the more troubling things that I heard in there, and I've heard this in many other industries as well, is that when they make decisions and policies, guess who they don't invite to the table to help with the decision making? And that's the industry itself, right? That is troubling. And we heard the same thing in forestry. If you go back and look on Kelowna Now Media, and you go look back a year, we've done, I don't know, probably more stories than most of the other outlets combined on it. And one of the things that they said is, even David Eby, when I interviewed him, said, there's problems in the forestry sector and they're going to do something about it. So they created this panel, and that they were going to talk about forestry. And guess what the industry said as soon as the panel was created? Not enough industry representation. So what's the point? We don't want to hear from the people that actually have to do the work. Isn't that one of the basic things they teach us that in when we're going through a CPA, they say, you got to go to the front line, you got to listen to the people that are actually doing the work, right? But apparently government doesn't want to listen. Well,
and at this very conference, Brad West spoke as well, the mayor of Port Coquitlam, and he called for a housing roundtable. Industry has been calling for a housing roundtable for decades, and it's really heightened over the last 8 years under this government, where there could be an industry voice, where there could be an industry collective, and what I've always encouraged is if government isn't doing it, do it yourself. And I'd love to see a housing representation where it was a collective of all the voices around the table that could come out and suggest best policy and also help government make better choices on a move forward basis.
We got one last thing. We're just coming up. We got about 4 minutes left. And one of the things that Sam Cooper, and Sam Cooper, he tends to break some stories, and he's put something out. I put it on my LinkedIn there. It's a good story. It's well worth reading. But he put out the family tree of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and then you draw your own lines and strings or whatever you want there. But it's an odd one. And I said when it first came out that this will be the biggest scandal for the BC NDP. It's an odd one for sure. There's the denials by Chrystia Freeland. Now she's shuffled off, like she left her post as a transport minister. Now she's going to go be an envoy for Ukraine. And here it is, McKinsey & Co. is tied into this. McKinsey & Co. taking millions and millions of dollars from the Liberal government. They are definitely so intertwined in there. And it looks like there's got quite a few fingers than McKinsey staffers in this Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Yeah, we need to do a deeper dive. Thank goodness that we have some of these journalists that are still very independent and very much so trying to do the job of that investigation. This is a huge story, and I think it's going to get bigger. I think you're right. This could be the BC ferries for the NDP. This could be the scandal for the for the Liberal government. This does not look good. It does not pass the sniff test in any way, shape, or form. And I think we're going to see more coming in the next little while. What ends up happening is that when Sam starts down a certain path, more whistleblowers come forward and kind of start feeding him with more information. And so I think we're going to see more on this. I really hope that other opposition parties like the Conservatives or even the Parti Québécois will start to ask some serious questions on this as well, because I think the Canadian public deserves a greater level of transparency and understanding as to what's going on here.
It's an odd one for sure. Like, it absolutely makes zero sense, and their defense that was pushed out by the media and by David Eby, and that was like, well, no other companies bid for it. I mean, that's why we had to go to China. Yeah, no other companies bid for it because the cost was one of the factors. China doesn't have an industrial carbon tax. China can use slave labor. China uses inferior steel. So yeah, so how should a Canadian company compete with that? How?
Yeah, and we simply can't. I mean, if we link it all the way back to Canadian competitiveness, I mean, our government has rendered us unable to compete on any stage other than our own, which means that we're standing alone and we're not buying from ourselves. So yeah, why would a Canadian company take the time? And just to put it into context for anyone, bidding on these would be in the neighborhood of anywhere between like $1 to $5 million of actual due diligence and design and work that would have to be performed to actually create that bid. So it's not small, and so you're not going to put a bid in if you already know that the deck is stacked against you and that they already have a proposed or a favored bidder. When you put cost as number one, you know that somebody else is going to get that bid, because Canadians we're just not cost competitive.
And the stink was pretty bad already with why Eby chose that, because $4 billion in economic activity would really do well for British Columbia right now. But the stink just gets a whole lot worse, and the Liberals are involved in it because of that Canada Infrastructure Bank loaning our tax dollars to build ferries in China.
Yeah. And the fact that we're seeing documents where they knew about it, and where the ministers knew about it while they were on the floor, and we're held accountable for the words that we say as elected politicians on that floor. It's like being under oath. You take an oath as an elected official, and everything that is said on that floor is recorded, and that's where Chrystia Freeland really is in some hot water, because she lied on that Parliament House floor.
Well, she's got a just reward for it, right? She's going to be the envoy to Ukraine for the restructuring with a $4.5 billion bag of cash that they said that they can't disclose how that's spent because of the national security. And so, wow, that'll be a tough gig, right?
Oh, I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What are you going to be rebuilding when the country is still under war? Honestly, to keep her MP salary and then have her completely distracted while, and singularly focused. I don't even understand how that meets any sort of accountability measure.
L test,
yeah,
it's pretty bad.
That doesn't make any sense. And so, I mean, we're yet to see the other MPs moved out into different positions, but I don't know what Carney's doing on this one. It doesn't smell good.
That's it. That's over an hour. So, again, I thank you for your time. Lots to talk about always, though, right? I mean, it just seems to keep on giving. And the budget is so important. I think people need to go do some reading on this budget. I did do a really good post on LinkedIn on it as well. And I think, you got to listen and you got to go where the people are talking about it. Like it's typically only the independent journalists are talking about, because it sure ain't happening on CBC and CTV. Although Vasi Capellas is one of the better journalists out there, so I could give credit there. But,
yeah, she did cover it, and she did get some good political commentators to really give some gears. This is important, and Canadians need to wake up, because we are asleep at the wheel right now and heading for a cliff. The Parliamentary Budget Office is trying to get our attention, and hopefully we'll pay attention.
All right, thank you, Renee. As usual, we'll see you next week. And until then, enjoy this beautiful fall weather we're having here in the Okanagan.
Yes, thank you so much, Jim, and enjoy.
Thank you for watching Now Media.